Quick, but you already heard all my quick.
Yeah, you did all the quick ones.
You guys all set?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm good. I guess if you can talk about, we had a tragic accident in Milwaukee last night.
Yeah, unbelievable. Anytime we lose an officer anywhere across the state, obviously, early last year we lost law enforcement professionals up in the Wausau area and a trooper out of the Toma district over by the Dells. But this has been the first time in more than 2 decades in Milwaukee. For me, or at least personally, it hit me hard just looking at this young officer is about evenly between the ages of my sons, Matt and Alex. So just seeing him, when we got the update last night, I talked to the chief late last night, talked to Mike Crivello, the head of the police association, obviously expressed our condolences and our prayers and just our sharing in the absolute grief that they're feeling, having lost an incredible hero who was early on in his career. But as I said to them, to me, whether it's through a traffic accident or a shootout, whether it's in the first year of service or a day before retirement, anytime we lose someone in law enforcement, it's a horrible blow, not just to the Milwaukee Police Department, but to law enforcement across the state and across the nation.
There was and I haven't seen it so far,
Yeah.
a letter from the Farm Association regarding tariffs and how it's going to affect their business. I guess sort of your reaction to that.
Yeah, this is something I've been talking about for some time. I started talking about with the administration last summer, where I was concerned about the specific concerns in both agriculture and manufacturing about the tariffs. I hope, having talked to Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, whether or not they change the overall policy or not, I'd hope that we could make the case for some exemptions. And Wilbur Ross in particular, I talked about a number of instances in the past, whether it's ginseng, cranberries, dairy-related products, or soybeans or corn. There's a lot of areas out there. And oftentimes the two go hand in hand in the sense that just down the way in Janesville, I've been at Seneca earlier this year talking about that plant and the multiple other operations they have across the state. They're a manufacturing site, but they package agricultural products. In fact, the Oakfield site is almost exclusively to Japan and to South Korea in terms of the vegetable products they can and package there. And so it has a real impact. In the case of Seneca, a good example is the 10 plate steel that they need for their 10 cans that they put the vegetables in. Right now, they try to purchase steel domestically, but they only do. They're able to purchase about 40% of that within country. The rest has to come elsewhere. So I've talked about getting exemptions for 10 plate steel, for ultra thin aluminum, for certain agricultural products. We're going to advocate in every way possible for Wisconsin's farmers and manufacturers to try and make sure we can continue to have strong markets.
Governor Walker, Kikkoman gave a $100,000 endowment to Delavan Darien High School today, but that doesn't necessarily help with the operational expenses that they have, which they've been struggling with. They pitched a referendum, it didn't pass, and ultimately they had to shut down Darien Elementary School. Operationally, how does a school like that go forward and sort of rebound? And is there anything that the state legislature could do to lend them a hand and help out school funding?
Well, we did this year. They're going to have to look at what they do going forward. We put an extra $200 in for every student this school year, another $204 on top of that. We have put other provisions in to help along the way. But it is one where we're going to have to look at ways for smaller rural school districts. We increased sparsity aid. I had talked about expanding eligibility for sparsity aid. Right now, it only goes up to $745. We upped the dollar amount. I was proud to sign that into law. But a lot of districts like Delavan Darien, particularly if they're combined or unified districts, sometimes have the challenge that they're a bit over that threshold. I proposed raising that threshold. I'd like to take another crack at that in the next state budget. That certainly would help for a district like that. Sparsity aid goes up to $400 more on top of that $200 and $204 increase. So that would certainly help them along the way. The other long-term thing that needs to happen, and that's something, there's a Blue Ribbon Commission on that, and that is on just changing the overall school aid formula. Delavan's a classic example of that. You've got the lake area, which is high property value because of the lake, like it is here in Lake Geneva and other lakes. You've got folks in the city where I lived as a kid, much lower property value. And in Delavan's case particularly, even more so than from when I was there, you've got about 2/3 of the students qualify for low reduced lunch programs or meal programs. And so that's just, there's a real imbalance between high property values, the lake, and people that don't have the economic means on the other end. So we've got to change that. My hope is the legislature will follow our lead and make those changes in sparsity, which would help districts like Delavan. Yeah.
On that same theme, Delavan district officials have said that they get a certain amount of aid from the state, and other surrounding districts get more, based going all the way back to 1992, 93 in the QEO. Is there anything that can be done to equalize that out in the future?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One, the school aids we gave, that's why I did a categorical aid for the increase we did, which was the largest increase, the largest amount we've ever spent overall on schools. But we did it through a categorical, forgive the wonky talk on that, but categorical, what that means is no matter what the formula is, every district, so the distribution was the same for every district in the state. The base of the formula was the way it was back to the 90s, but for what we added, it was the $200 goes to every school in every district in every part of the state. The $204 they'll get in this fall is on top of that. Sparsity aid as well applies that way. It's regardless of the formula, it's just a part of the size. So help going along with our proposal to raise sparsity aid would help. And then long-term changes to the overall school aid formula. I don't know that you can ever get completely away from property value, because there's obviously some sense as to why that's a part of the equation, but we think there's got to be some way that you can balance property value with overall income levels, so that you don't have these disproportionate situations where districts have a lot of value on paper, but they don't have the means to pay for that. And that'll be part of this Blue Ribbon Commission that's been meeting across the state to come up with some recommendations.
Alrighty. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Governor.
Great, thanks guys.